Okay, so today we're going to be talking about empowerment and citizen participation. And so when we're thinking about empowerment and citizen participation, this is where community psychology starts becoming less of focused on. This is sort of where it moves away from some of the social service-oriented fields, right? Some of the social work, for example, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we get into some of these definitions. So this is where community psychologists really want to work with communities to empower them to advocate for themselves, right? To be sort of self-sufficient, self-reliant, as opposed to just providing some sort of service to communities. And so this is what I mean, where community psychologists sort of take a turn as opposed to some other types of fields. So again, you'll see what I mean. So in this talk, we're going to be going over empowerment, citizen participation, and power. So types of power, what integrative power is, and what instruments of power are. Now throughout this talk, be sure to be making notes about what questions you have so that you can bring those to class and we can discuss those as a class. So any questions that come up, please jot those down, bring those to class so we can talk about them in more detail. So Lila Watson has this this quote: "If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's walk together." Now this quote really sort of exemplifies what empowerment and citizen participation means. And if you're a community psychologist, for example, and you want to come help Lila, she doesn't want your help, but she wants you to walk in the struggle with her and to work with her in order to empower her community and to become an empowered citizen and participate in citizen activities. So let's think about empowerment for a minute. So one of the original definitions of empowerment, and this definition has, actually this is not one of the original definitions, empowerment has evolved significantly over time. And this is one of the most recent thoughtful definitions that we've had for this construct. And this definition is an intentional, ongoing process centered in a local community involving mutual respect, critical reflection, caring, and group participation, through which people lacking an equal share of resources gain greater access and control over those resources. Now, to understand what empowerment is, we really need to unpack that definition. So, empowerment involves gaining and exercising greater power. And what that means is citizens coming together and individuals coming together in a way that allows them to shape their environment. That's what power is, the ability to make decisions in your environment, in your organizations, in your communities. Empowerment also has cognitive, emotional, and behavioral components, right? It's the act of acting as a citizen. Cognitively, it's a greater sense of efficacy. Emotionally, it has emotional components with it as well. It also has reciprocal relationships, so empowerment is relational, right? It has to do with building relationships with other people within a community. And it goes across multiple levels. So empowerment theory goes all the way from the individual level, where individuals have the ability to gain access over resources, to gain greater power, to have that sense of empowerment, that sense of self-efficacy, right? But it also goes across that. It goes up to organizations and cultures and societies, and those can have effects on the individual, right? An organization can be an empowering organization by enhancing empowerment for its members. And we can think of this, the sort of key example is mutual help groups, right? Self-help groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous is thought to be a fairly empowering organization because members of those organizations take control over their lived experiences and take control over the resources that they need in order to enhance their own wellness. Now, obviously, there are some limitations of empowerment, as there's limitations for everything. And I want to focus mostly on these limits at the bottom here. So while empowerment is nice and it's a nice term and it's supposed to be good for everybody, empowerment of one group can come at the expense of another group. And so that's an issue when you have sort of ideas or needs or resources of a community that are conflicting across groups. If one group is empowered and takes control over those resources, it can come at the oppression of another group. Also, feeling empowered by, on a survey, if I say I feel empowered, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to act on that. So that's where the behavioral and cognitive components sort of differ, right? Because if I feel empowered, but I don't really do anything to gain control over resources in my life, then I'm not actually acting in an empowered way. Now, citizen participation is a piece of empowerment. It's sort of a way in which people can become empowered and gain the resources that they need in their lives to live a well life. And so citizen participation is defined as a process in which individuals take part in decision-making in the institutions, programs, and environments that affect them. Right? So this is the sort of the behavioral component of empowerment in a lot of ways. It's acting in a way that allows individuals to make decisions that affect their lives, to make decisions in institutions that affect their lives, and part of that is also gaining control of resources that they may need. And so this is not volunteering, right? This isn't what many of you are doing currently in your organizations. This is actually being an active participant in making decisions. That's the key component in this is making decisions. It's using your voice to make decisions deliberately for your community and for yourself. And so here's as I mentioned where community psychologists start to differ from some of the service-oriented fields, right? So a citizen and a client, the difference here is that citizens again take action to make sure that they can make decisions within their communities. So they emphasize the rights, competencies, and collaborative relationships within a particular community. Whereas a client, on the other hand, emphasizes needs, deficits, and there's sort of a hierarchical relationship there. A citizen, on the other hand, is more of a sort of equal level of power between people who give care, providers, and people who utilize care. And additionally, citizen participation tends to be more effective when it's done in a collective way. So, utilizing collective action. So we can think of various examples of this, such as neighborhood groups, student coalitions, organizations, or unions, for example, gay-straight alliances in high schools and other schools. So with citizen participation, becoming collective action is a process by which citizens come together under a shared goal to create change in their local community and their local context. Additionally, citizen participation can be both a means to an end as well as an end in and of itself. And so a means to an end, citizen participation, when citizens can come together and make decisions that are positively influential in their communities, that's sort of a means to an end, right? It's the utilization of citizen participation to create something positive in your community space. However, citizen participation can be an end in and of itself. And one of the main aspects of citizen participation is it provides the opportunity for residents of, say, a neighborhood to come together and build relationships with one another. They can build social connections, they can build social support, and participating as a citizen allows for those connections to be made. So, if we're going to be talking about empowerment and citizen participation, we also need to talk necessarily about power. So the question is here, what is power? What does it mean? How is it manifested? Who has power? How does it fit within our social structure? And so there are three main types of power. The first type is power over. And power over occurs when one group or one person or one entity basically has the ability to dominate, to compel, to enforce something, or to make somebody or another group do something that they may or may not want to do. And power is often rooted in social structures, right? So the way governments are created, the police has power over individuals within a particular society. Your boss has power over you in your organization. Even in our classroom, I, as the instructor, have power over you because I have power over your grades, right? Many of you may not want to take an exam, but I have the power to make you do that. That's sort of how power works in that structure. Oftentimes coercion is used. So coercion is when one entity basically makes somebody do something they don't want to do, somebody else. And oftentimes power over it is sort of an oppressive thing. It can be used benevolently or for self-interest, but oftentimes it's for oppressive purposes. So the most sort of salient example is a dictatorship, right? Dictators have power over everybody in their country. So that's sort of the stereotypical version of power over. Power 2, on the other hand, is more an equal playing field. It's more relational, right? So this is when two groups have power on sort of an equal playing field, and they use persuasion to work together to develop their own goals, to develop mutual goals that are supportive of each point of view, right? And so an example for this would be if a community organizing group organizes a large constituency around issues of police brutality, for example, and they go to the police chief with many, many people and negotiate with that police chief around various issues of police brutality within a community. If they can get laws changed or get procedures changed or get policies changed within the police force using persuasion, that's sort of an example of power 2. So in terms of the more macro structure, a democracy in a lot of ways would be sort of considered a power 2 type of organization, type of governance. And then finally, power from is the ability to resist power from others, to resist sort of the power over from other individuals or from other entities. So to be able to resist a dominant boss, for example. And one way to do this is through collective action at a more micro organizational locality or macro level. So an example would be getting collective action together to take action over some oppressive law that has been established. And I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, but I can't. But let's think about, say, TSA, the people who check you in when you go to the airport, right? If they establish some sort of rule that you need to take your pants off before walking through the detection system, and citizens got together and protested and made sure that didn't happen, that would be power from, right? Now, integrative power is somewhat similar to power 2. It's the ability or the capacity to work together to build groups. And so the idea here is kind of like people power, right? This again is sort of a collective action type of thing. It's the ability for groups to come together under a shared unity or shared goal to build something powerful, to act in a collective way for mutual self-interest. So it's the ability to build groups together, to bind people together, to inspire loyalty based on social networks, friendships, shared unity over something or a shared goal over something. And integrative power has been used throughout history to create social change, right? The Boston Tea Party, labor unions, boycotts, all of these things are examples of integrative power. Now there are three major instruments of social power. And what I mean by instruments of social power is the ways in which power can manifest, the ways in which power can be used, and the resources that are controlled in order to gain power. So the three ways that the three sort of instruments of power here is, first, and probably the most obvious, is control over resources. The ability to have control over certain resources, whether it be monetary or otherwise, to be able to punish or dominate or have control over other groups. So we see this a lot in the political arena, where certain individuals or organizations who have a lot of money donate tons and tons of money to various political campaigns, right? Or they lobby Congress to get stuff passed, to get laws passed that many people may not want. So this is controlling resources to be able to change laws, for example, or policies or procedures at various levels of analysis. Additionally, controlling channels for participation in making decisions. So this sort of goes back to the citizen participation piece, right? So this is the idea that certain people can change rules to inhibit others from participating in making decisions. So this would be like having a closed city council meeting, so making decisions in city council that were closed to the public, right? That's controlling that channel of participation. Or making laws around voting where certain people are not allowed to vote, right? So these are controlling channels of participation in making decisions. And finally, the last instrument of power is shaping the definition of a public issue or conflict. And so when we're thinking about power, we can move this back to oppression and liberation and our discussion on diversity a couple of weeks ago. Shaping the definition of a public issue or conflict is sort of like that myth, that social myth thing that we've talked about before, where the media, communications media can shape the definition of a certain issue or the way individuals think to shape how we think about certain things. So shaping that definition is really important, and that's a way that an instrument of power is sort of manifested. So let's bring back power and do some summary thoughts on this. Power is really, really important if you want to create some sort of social change, right? Power is on a continuum. It's not unidimensional. It's very dimensional. And power really has to do with relationships and context, and how various groups relate to one another, how they relate within the group, and power can affect interventions as well. So it's necessary to think about power in terms of how it's manifested within groups, how it's manifested between groups. There you go. So let's recap. So at the end of this, you should think about what is empowerment in community psychology, and what are the elements of empowerment, how is it defined, what is citizen participation, how is that manifested, what are the various types of power, and how is power used.